So how long have we been waiting for this news? Forever, it seems. And finally, we are going to get all of the Sweeney, that's all the episodes, on Blu-ray in high definition. That's what we've been waiting for such a long time. I mean, certainly on the restoration side of things, Tim Beddoes instigated the work on Regan and the first series way back in 2011. And we went through, we scanned the original negatives, except for Ringer, of course, which you may know, unfortunately has no master negative existing. So for that episode, we had to use 3 faded and worn prints. Why 3 prints, you ask? Well, because they were all damaged and cut in different places. So to get the complete thing in the best quality, we had to sort of jigsaw puzzle 3 together. Not ideal, of course, and the actual resulting quality in terms of image clarity is obviously nowhere near as good as the negative episodes, but it's there at least anyway. But we did the work on the first series, and we're all hoping, of course, that we just continue work on the other series. And in fact, there was a bit of PR put out at the time saying that we were going to be working on all 53 episodes. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and the second series never came in. I mean, we never even got the film out of the vault. There was no scans done, nothing after series 1. And it wasn't until 10 years later, at the beginning of 2022, that Tim said, I think it's about time we finished and did the rest of the Sweeney. So that's what we started doing. We called in the film materials, the original 16mm AB negatives for series 2, started to get those scanned. We were working on the episodes. We got to about episode 3 of series 2, something like that. And then Tim said, do you know what? I'd quite like widescreen masters as well, please.
Come again.
Now that took us a bit by surprise, because the restoration team, that's myself and my 2 former colleagues, Amanda Whitby and Mark Stanborough, we'd always been very anti, changing the ratio of things, because back in the early DVD days, there had been a few releases, I think, under these sort of titles like Diamond Geezers and Car Chases, I think. And they had been in widescreen. And when we were going to do the full series releases, we said, well, there's no way we're doing it in widescreen. It's got to be 4:3. So I asked Tim about this. I said, why the change of heart on that? And he said, well, I think now, we're talking, 20 years after that initial decision with the DVDs, I can see that there's 2 different types of consumer. You've got the purists on the one side that want, 4:3, any sort of logos that go on the front and end. So you're talking about like the Thames Salute, the original commercial breaks in the original places, and with the captions, end of part 1, part 2, that kind of thing. You've got those sort of consumers. And then on the other side, you've got the type of people that, aren't maybe quite so concerned with what the original ratio was. They have 16:9 widescreen TVs. They probably prefer to have the image filling their TV with no black down the sides. And maybe they find the commercial breaks slightly intrusive. So they prefer maybe a continuous presentation. So that was the thinking behind it. So we thought, okay, we'll go down that route then. If we're working from the original film materials, of course, where you've got to be a bit careful about the rounded corners of the frame on the original negative, because it's Academy ratio 16mm. You obviously have a margin of loss in terms of picture area around the edge. When you're then doing a widescreen version, you can sometimes eke out a little bit more from the edge, because you're sort of doing a bit of a slice of the picture. And the idea was that, rather than people, say, hitting the zoom button on their TVs and stretching out the picture or just zooming in or whatever, you might as well have a version that's optimized for that ratio. So it's a more modern presentation, So as I say, we'd got to about episode 3 when this decision was made. And of course, that meant we had to then go back to the earlier series. So we got hold of the HD Cam SR high definition master tapes of what we'd done previously, re-ingested those, and then started having a look at the episodes. And it was interesting, because having then now had new scans for series 2, we decided to rework the first series and do a little bit more on that again. So there was a few grading tweaks along the way. We did a lot more cleanup. And then when we looked at the Ringer episode particularly, that needed a lot of extra cleanup, stabilisation, cleaning up of the edit points, because there'd been printed problems where the shots changed. You had sort of like defocused frames, you had the frames settling down, things like that. So we wanted to clean that up a little bit more. Still of lesser quality, of course, compared to the others, but hopefully slightly improved. So then we carried on working our way through the various episodes, and as I say, we were producing 4:3 masters and 16:9 widescreen presentation. And the other thing about the widescreen presentation as well, as I mentioned, it hasn't got commercial breaks. So they've been taken out. Now, unlike those very early DVD releases I mentioned, which also removed the commercial breaks, we didn't have the problem of music overhanging into the incoming scene. Now, that's because we had access to the dialogue, music and effects tracks, separate tracks. So at those break points where you'd pull it up, where you had the incoming part 2 music, part 3 music overhanging the scene, on the old DVDs, they had to actually cut footage to get rid of that, and in some cases lost some dialogue. But we didn't have to do that. Every frame of the original episode is there apart from the break captions, because we remixed the audio at those points to remove the music. Now, DNR, that's an interesting one, digital noise reduction. That can be used obviously to reduce grain in film shots, film images that have a lot of grain. The grain structure can be sort of taken down slightly, but of course it can be well overused, and it can sometimes turn a film transfer into looking like some sort of video format standards conversion, and that's horrendous. At the end of the day, film is film. It has a grain side to it, it has a texture, and you'd never want to get rid of that. But I do feel that some of these modern scans from the negatives have a lot more grain and high frequency noise than they ever did when we watched a print, whether that would be in the cinema or on the television or anything like that. Because in going to the next element, when you copy one image to another, there was a sort of a roll-off in the resolution side of things, and that would effectively do a kind of noise reduction optically at the top end on the fine grain. So I do find sometimes if you scan a raw negative, it's a bit excessive on the grain side of things. And that's not just my opinion. I'll talk this over with colleagues that work in the film laboratories, and they're not that keen on excessive grain you get sometimes from a neg scan now. A conformed 50-minute episode takes around 0.8 terabytes of data, so I'm very conscious, even with the fact that the file delivery version is quite a bit less at around 75 to 80 gigabytes, it's still a lot bigger than the very highly compressed version that the consumer gets on a disc. So I'm always a bit wary about what that's going to do to the grain. The fact that compression algorithms don't like noise. However, because there's a lot of people that do seem to use this as a yardstick about whether a release is good or not, has it had DNR or not, if it has, I'm not touching it. What we decided to do, we spoke about this within the team, and we haven't used any. So if you didn't like DNR, you don't have to worry about it, because on the new scans that we started, we haven't used any digital noise reduction. However, there are times where things become ridiculously excessive, where they're in some low lighting scenes and they may have used a fast film stock. You've got this effect like almost mosquitoes buzzing around in the shadows. And similarly, at the sort of white end of the spectrum, sometimes there are shots where you've got skies and there's this sort of black grain effect going on with black dots everywhere. Now, that may be to do with slight deterioration in the film stock over time. I mean, we are talking half a century old film here now. I mean, it's frightening, really. And you do wonder if there's been a bit of deterioration. There certainly has been deterioration in terms of density flutter going on now. So that's a sort of like a flicker where the picture levels are riding up and down, and you see this flickery thing on the picture, which again is not great. So we have digitally removed that side of things. But on the 16:9 versions, where you're zooming the picture somewhat, and the grain gets a little bit more in your face, we have used grain management on that to calm it down and try and improve the look of it slightly. I can barely believe that it's taken 14 years to finally finish the complete Sweeney in high definition, and the last 7 episodes that were in an unfinished state have only been finished this year, 2025. So basically there are 2 complete sets of HD masters catering for sort of 2 different markets now. You've got the 4:3 purist version, as I say, no noise reduction, commercial breaks, logos, everything else. You've got the 16:9 widescreen, reconstructed opening titles in widescreen, a bit of noise reduction on the actual image, no commercial breaks, remixed audio so it's seamless at the what would have been originally the commercial break points, and that is a more modern presentation. So in terms of the 4:3 masters, they are definitely coming out. You're getting all of those on Blu-ray. We're going to have a complete set of high definition masters of the Sweeney, which is amazing because, you know, we've been waiting forever, it seems. In terms of the widescreen, I'm not entirely sure at this stage what the outlet is going to be for that. Maybe there'll be a physical release, a complete series, one in one hit, I don't know. Or it might be that the widescreen is going to be left for streaming. I really don't know. But the point is, all the episodes have been done. There's 2 sets of masters in 2 different ratios, and it's all ready to go, which is great. And I personally like to thank Old Gold Media, Spirit Entertainment, Fremantle Media, and of course the late great Tim Beddoes, without whom, well, maybe we'd still be waiting another 5-10 years, who knows. But the point is that everybody involved with this is really excited that it's finally happening. We hope that everybody that's watching this video is equally as excited. However, if you do happen to be watching this and you're thinking, you know what, Sweeney Schmeeny, I mean, I've seen all the episodes, I'll just stick with the DVDs. Or maybe I'll wait for it to end up on broadcast television, even if it's going to be like, you know, shabby old masters and re-edited, you know. Or maybe you disagree with something that I've said in this video. Well, before you say anything, I do believe Jack Regan has a couple of words of good advice for you.
Shut it!